Howdy. It's Tuesday, August 18th, and back down at the farm here. This is the first video in about 3 weeks, I think. I was on vacation and was here briefly about a week ago, but that was mostly just to get the generator because we had a big storm go through central Iowa where I live, and came back from vacation a couple days early because we didn't have power. Fortunately, didn't have any damage, and power was on when we got home, but ended up taking the generator up and let some other people borrow it to run their refrigerators and stuff. Anyway, back to normal, I guess, now, and need to get some things done. So the first thing on the list, the last time I was down here, I was trying to spot spray with the four-wheeler, and it was acting funny, making noise, and eventually kind of stopped making noise, but was basically grabbing in gear, even at idle. So my suspicion is what happened. It has kind of two clutches. There's a clutch pack that actuates when you actually shift gears to disengage the engine, and then there's a centrifugal clutch, which basically is what engages your motive force to move the four-wheeler when the engine revs up, and then basically when it's at idle, doesn't put power into the drivetrain. And my suspicion is, from what I can tell, there's like three weights basically, so as it spins faster, the weights spring out against the drum thing and then engage the drum. My suspicion is that one of the springs that holds those weights back broke. So basically there's like one of those weights that's rubbing all the time, which makes the four-wheeler want to move forward and backwards whenever you put it into gear, which then kind of makes it hard to drive. And also means that there probably are some chunks of metal in the bottom of the oil pan. So I'm going to try to tear into that. I'm hoping basically this whole right cover on the engine has to come off, and my hope is that I can get that off without taking everything clear apart. It looks like probably I'm going to have to take off at least some of the plastics. But we'll see how it goes. I want to get that opened up at least and try to figure out what the deal is, so that if I need to order parts, I can get that done, because I really have some more stuff that I need to spot spray sooner than later, and it happened right before I needed to head out there a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago almost, and didn't have time to mess with it that day. So that's going to be the first adventure. I've got some corn to haul. Would like to do a little bit more mowing around field edges and stuff, because I have some that I didn't get done before of that also, and a few other things that I need to take care of while I'm down here. But hopefully I'll be here for about 3 days or so anyway, and I'll end the combine, I guess. So I'm hoping to get the grain tank stuff all put back together, and hopefully also do a little bit more thorough inspection of the whole combine mechanism and figure out if I need to order any other parts or if there's anything else that's going to need major attention. I don't think there's anything too crazy, but I haven't looked at it in 7 months other than what I've been working on in the grain tank, so actually more than 7, 9 probably. That's, I guess, the other thing that's on the agenda. Some of the aftermarket places are doing sales here in the next 2 or 3 weeks, so it's a good time to know what you need for some of the preventative maintenance things to get those parts ordered, or that, well, they are less expensive. But as I said, first agenda, tearing into this bad boy, so we'll see what we find. So we got the sprayer and the seat off, and the way things look, I think I'm going to have to take off this rear plastic section, which hopefully won't be a real big deal. I think the spots that are going to be hard are these 3 bolts that are down by the foot pegs, and all of this was apart 4 years ago. When I bought this, it was leaking a lot of oil where the cylinder attaches onto the crankcase, and had that all apart, put a new gasket in it, and it still leaks some. Not as much as it did, but it's getting worse. Probably it would be a good idea to do that again and try to up the game a little bit somehow to seal it up better. But the way it is now, we just kind of put more oil in it and keep driving it. But anyway, I'm hoping that nothing will be too bad. I put penetrating oil on all of those screws. As you can see, some of these are hex head. I think probably because we destroyed Phillips bolts getting them out last time. And they don't look too bad on the threads on the bottom. I got some penetrating well on those already, so it can kind of soak in a little bit as I dig the dirt out of the Phillips head there with a seal pick and an air hose. Got all the plastics off and went ahead and pressure washed everything a little bit. There was a lot of cornstalk pieces and grass and everything else kind of wedged up underneath the motor, and quite a bit of dirt around some of the pieces on this side of the case I'm going to take off. So I thought maybe it would be worth trying to keep that from getting inside the motor as much as possible. I'm going to let it trip off and dry a little bit here, maybe turn it into the sun so this side dries off first, and then pop this guy off and see what we find. There's not very much wind this morning, so while the four-wheeler is kind of drying off, we're going to try to hoist this catwalk up between those two platforms. There was really kind of supposed to be one involved in the project when this bin went up last year, but the supplier that we got it from, they were back ordered and it never showed up, or I don't know exactly what happened, but anyway, Dad finally gave up and called somebody else, and they happened to have one sitting in their warehouse that he got bought kind of reasonable, I think. So basically he's got the brackets up here, so there's an angle iron underneath the platform here, and then it's going to sit on top of that angle iron that's over there. I thought he was going to get a lift to bring it up, but I think we're just going to try to hoist it with ropes, so we'll see how that goes. It's not super heavy, maybe less than 100 pounds, so if we have a rope on both ends, 50 pounds each-ish, but we'll see. We're back on the four-wheeler. Got the oil drained out, or it's still dripping a little bit out of the drain hole. And then this is the oil filter here, which I haven't pulled out yet, but the cover, I don't know if it'll show up in the video or not, but there's some little chunks of metal in there. I haven't checked yet to see if it's steel or if it's magnetic or not. Not what I wanted to see, but not super surprising, I guess, at this point. Just have to see what we find when we get farther in. Let's go ahead and pull the oil filter out and see. The oil didn't look too bad other than when I pulled the oil filter thing, so having a little bit of metal may not be that big of a deal as long as it got caught before the filter. You can see there's some oil that's on the tube there. Probably might cut that open and see what all's in it. We're getting close to the moment of truth here. I think I have all the bolts out of this cover. I had to take, there's a oil cooler line, or an oil cooler up in the front that has a line here and a line here. The fittings were kind of blocking some of the bolts that hold this cover on, so I had to get those taken off. So far, pretty straightforward, I guess. I'm hoping that everything is loose now. I thought maybe I had to take these 3 bolts loose, but it seems like maybe they're holding something inside related to the shift clutch. So I'm hoping that if I kind of tap this or yank on it a little bit or pry, use like a pry notch back here, that I can pop that gasket and then that whole side cover will come off. I got the oil drained out of the engine, obviously, so I'm guessing that probably there's going to be some oil that comes out, so I've got my drain pan under here yet. Probably most of it's going to go onto that rear skid plate. I had to take the front skid plate off to get to the bolts. One of the Allen screws that held that front oil cooler fitting in. So far, the only place that I've really seen metal was in the actual oil filter housing, so I'm hoping nothing too catastrophic happened. We'll just have to see what we find. I really can't see anything that should be holding it, so we're going to give it a little tappy tap tap. I think I'm going to take this plug out and make sure that there's nothing in there that might be holding something. I think this is just an access to adjust the shift clutch, but not entirely sure. Well, we're loose, and I mean, I've got a crack all the way around where the seam is, but it still won't come off. So I don't know if I've got something bound up inside there, if there's like an alignment pin that's sticking. A lot of times with aluminum housings like this, you'll have a steel dowel pin or a few steel dowel pins to keep everything in alignment when you put the aluminum pieces together. My concern is that if I pry too hard, I'm going to screw up something either internally, or if there's like a bolt that comes through from the backside somewhere that I can't get to, then I could also do some significant damage to actual castings or something, and I don't really want to do that. So we're going to consult the manual, take a little lunch break, and see what we can figure out. Well, the side case is off now, and looks like we've got some carnage. Not super serious, and I haven't pulled the pieces apart yet. So I think the deal was it wouldn't come off because it was kind of binding on this. Basically it's a bushing, but it's used as an alignment pin. So that was keeping the side cover from coming off easily, but I was able to sort of wedge, put enough in between and tap on the case, and eventually it loosened up on that side. So it looks like the problem is in that centrifugal clutch, but we've got bigger problems than just a broken spring. I haven't, like I said, pulled it out yet, but I think the backing plate is busted up. There should be a spring on each of these weights, and all 3 springs appear to be MIA. There's clips that hold these weights on, and one of them is missing, and that looks like there's a washer there too. And you can kind of see like there's a little bit of a sheen to those, and that's because they've been rubbing on the inside of the case, which for as shiny as they are, it doesn't look like it's really done much damage to the aluminum. It did mangle that little cover on the oil sight glass. There's not a lot of metal in the case here. I did find one kind of shard here that I'm not sure where it came from. It'd be nice to know what that was. I don't know if I'll find out. But it looks like I'm gonna kind of pull this stuff apart. This nut, I believe, is like a left-hand thread, so I'm gonna pop it off with the impact and then see exactly what chunks, or maybe we'll just pull and see what chunks come out here. Yeah, so no bueno. This should all be one piece of metal. Clearly blew that up. Some plastic bushing pieces that are kind of disintegrated. But everything was fine until the day that it made noise, and I, just drove it enough to get the load sprayed off and get back home. But clearly something let loose. So I would guess that this blew up and then eventually the springs disintegrated. The inside of this drive piece doesn't seem too bad, so so this would be the crankshaft, and then this would be what drives the rest of the transmission. So I think I should be able to just replace this centrifugal clutch assembly, which is sold as one piece, and they're not terribly expensive, and hopefully we'll be able to be back in business. So here's what we ended up with. Totally blew apart that backing plate, and I imagine that's what precipitated everything else coming apart. One of these clips, the one that was on here, was down in the bottom nook on this case, and it looks like there's a piece of one of the springs there also. So far that's the only piece of spring that I've found. I wonder if this other shard here maybe was a part of a spring also, because it looks like cylindrical wire. But I'm a little creeped out that I haven't found more pieces than that, because normally you really don't want a lot of metal going through gears and stuff like that. All the gears in here look okay, but I'm probably going to kind of fish around with the magnet and see if I can pull anything out of the transmission side. So the way that this works, the engine and transmission are kind of all one assembly, and they share oil. So the engine oil also is in the transmission, and you have to use oil that's appropriate to work with the clutches also, which we just use 1540 Rotella, the same thing as we run in most of all of the farm equipment, because it supposedly is rated okay, and we have it on hand anyway. But the surface on here, it's a little bogered up on the outside edge, but I don't think that those friction weight things actually rub on that in normal use. So my thought at this point is maybe to just replace that weighted centrifugal clutch assembly. It seems like that's basically all that's wrong, as long as I don't have any big chunks of metal elsewhere in the motor that are going to cause additional problems later. But that's kind of the million-dollar question, I guess. I don't see anything else that looks screwed up, or I can't find anything else that looks screwed up so far, so I'm hoping that that clutch assembly is all I need.